We're live, all right. Hi everyone, and welcome to Harnessing Copilots to Empower Accessibility in the Workplace. I'm so pleased to have you all with us today. I know there's been so many amazing sessions for Ignite, and to have you here and have you online with us is such a privilege and an honor, so thank you. We're gonna kick it off with some introductions. Now, Hiren.
Yeah, perfect,
go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Hiren Shukla. I lead EY's neurodiversity and inclusive value practice. We've been on a 9-year journey around neuroinclusion, and we get to partner with Microsoft a lot on how we are intersecting the inclusion journey with the technology journey. And so, by the way, as my co-presenter Anna said, thank you for being here today. You know those signs in bars that say it's 5 o'clock somewhere? It is 5 o'clock somewhere, but you're here with us, so thank you.
And my name is Anna Cook. I'm a senior designer at Microsoft. I work on Azure and Copilot in Azure. I am a neurodivergent white woman. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. And I'm super pleased to talk about this with you all today for many reasons. One of the biggest reasons, right, is that I am so eager for us to really discover the impact of inclusive design and how this is leveraged in Microsoft Copilot in general and Microsoft Copilot in Azure in particular, as well as beyond. Now, we're going to start by connecting the relationship between accessibility and workplace productivity. A lot of folks sometimes, right, can struggle to connect the benefits of accessibility for themselves. Not everyone identifies as having a disability, but the reality is that accessibility benefits everyone. Now, did you know that 1.3 billion people worldwide have disabilities? Now, this includes people with disabilities such as blindness, people who are deaf or hard of hearing, people who have mobility disabilities, and so much more. And 75% of those folks have disabilities that are considered non-apparent. Now, a non-apparent disability is one in which you may not recognize it just from meeting somebody or seeing them or talking to them. It's something you may not know. That means that there are many people around us that we may not know that have disabilities. Additionally, we know that 15 to 20% of people are neurodivergent, myself included. Neurodivergence means that somebody has a different or what could be considered an atypical way of cognitive processing. But no matter what you identify as, whether you have a disability or you are neurodivergent, 100% of us benefit from accessibility. Now, additionally, accessibility is key to workplace productivity. Companies that prioritize embedding accessibility have reported incredible results in their bottom line, while also providing equitable experiences for their employees. Companies that prioritize accessibility find that up to 70% of employee productivity increases by offering experiences that let people work in their own way. Companies that support accessibility through workplace accommodations tend to find that their turnover is lowered up to 30%. Companies achieved, on average, 28% higher revenue, 2 times the net income, and 30% higher economic profit margins over a 4-year period when prioritizing workplace accessibility. The numbers don't lie. Accessibility benefits everyone, and beyond being just really important for providing a meaningful and helpful workplace for your employees to thrive, it provides a meaningful way for your company and your teams to thrive. Now, let's talk about this from a Copilot perspective, right? A lot of us, if you are able, just raise your hand if you've tried Microsoft Copilot already. I'm sure a lot of us have, especially since you've been joining today and yesterday. Microsoft Copilot is designed to empower everyone, like many accessibility tools. Now, let me provide you an example to explain how this benefit expands to people in many different circumstances. Now, somebody like myself with dyslexia, I'm going to use Copilot in, say, Teams or Outlook to summarize all of my emails and Teams chats in a day. I can do that even if I've been in meetings or I've kind of had an idea of what's been going on, and it helps me just kind of reduce the cognitive load day to day of keeping up with what's happening, especially in text-based mediums. Now, this same benefit is going to help somebody who might have a temporary disability. Let's say they have a broken arm. And the reason that this benefits them is because it helps reduce the amount of clicking or moving through different apps and different chats and different emails, and it helps reduce the amount of time and energy spent keeping up. And similarly, I expect many of us in person here at Ignite today, this situationally helps as well, right? You can use something like this to help summarize things that you've missed while you've been in sessions that are really cool and wonderful like ours. The reality is the need for inclusion in AI innovation is significant. AI is so vast and far-reaching that prioritizing inclusion at the beginning of the work we are doing is critical to delivering the vision of AI as an engine for accessibility and inclusion. At Microsoft, we believe in inclusive design and the impacts that offers. When you include marginalized perspectives, people who have disabilities, people who are neurodivergent, you can build better products for everyone. Now, this is part of the reason I have my amazing co-speaker, Hiren, with me today. Hiren, I want to hear about this and how you at EY have been doing this and doing it with us.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So, very interestingly, 9 years ago, we are thinking about where does innovation come from? We all know innovation comes from thinking differently. And it was at that point in time where we're thinking about the intersection of talent, technology, and transformation that I was introduced to this area of non-apparent disability called neurodivergence. What you're seeing on the screen right now is a beautiful representation by our friend Dr. Nancy Doyle in the UK, where she shows not only the overlap of some of neurodivergent conditions, the more, I think, common and known, dyslexia, ADHD, autism, but dyscalculia, dysgraphia, acquired neurodiversity. There's a number of ways that people identify by having an inherent hardwired cognitive difference. This is a cognitive difference that shows up in thinking, learning, communication, and socialization style. And 9 years ago, we didn't have the stats on the business case, Anna, that we showed earlier, but we thought and had a hypothesis. What if we were to tap into the power of thinking differently? What would happen? Would we create more transformation capabilities in our organization for our clients? Would we accelerate the innovation journey for ourselves and for individuals? Would we raise and increase the employee experience at EY? And would that drive a differentiated value? Those were all the reasons that 9 years ago we conceived this idea of a center of excellence strictly around neurodiversity. And the why. Why did we really do this? Selfishly, as a business, it was we're going to get better, faster, smarter, and we're going to outperform any of our competitors in a space where we know technology is a massive equalizer at the end of the day. It's your people that will make a difference. And so the more we understand what neuroinclusion is, the better we tap into the existing workforce, which is estimated 20% of our organizations are neurodiverse already, but many may not be self-disclosing. So, quick question, and we've got a small group, so I'll ask for a quick poll of hands. How many of you work in the inclusion or accessibility space? Could you just raise your hand? All right, a couple of you. All right. I found out last year that I'm neurodivergent. By the way, 9 years ago, I had no idea. And so I now identify as a person with disabilities, but the experience is so different for each and every one of us. And what I find when we were going down this journey with Copilot is it was able to adapt to my individual needs differently than it was for my other colleagues. So let's go to the next slide because I want to establish a little bit of this 9-year journey that I keep referencing. So if we're going to lead neurodiversity value creation for our clients, colleagues, and communities, we really have to be serious about doing this. And today, we have a footprint in over 25 cities and 15 countries around the world. And as you could imagine, doing this in Warsaw, Poland is very different than doing it in Mumbai, India, than doing it in Bogota, Colombia. And so we had to create a system and a framework. But that 9-year lived experience journey has really taught us how do we adapt as an organization and what are the tools and frameworks we need to do that. And so if we go to the next slide, I want to show you something interesting because as we work closely with Microsoft on Copilot adoption, and then we're going to also share a separate story on some amazing work we've done over the last year with the Azure AI Foundry team. But we ran a 6-week sprint specifically with neurodivergent technologists who had never used Copilot before. They were using Copilot for the first time, and that sprint was to onboard them and to see what their usage, their productivity, what their accommodations and how it's helping them. Also to tell us where do we think there need to be improvements in Copilot. And what you're seeing here is that quick approach that we've taken across 6 weeks. Amazingly, in the first 3 weeks, about 55 use cases were already identified in 3 weeks' time. And the reason I say this to you all is because when you really lean in to inclusion and accessibility, I think you're unlocking new capacity in your organizations. And if you look at the right, 74% of the team members said Copilot either directly solved or helped solve their issue. 89% said they will continue to use Copilot on a daily basis. All of this is centered around the individual user experience. This is where we think accessibility lies. And I think that what precedes it is how you create the psychological safety and the space. And there's a study that EY has done with Microsoft that'll be coming out in about 2 weeks. In that study, we surveyed over 500 individuals across 16 companies around the world. And in that, we found that 91% of these individuals that identify as either neurodivergent or a person with disabilities view Copilot as an assistive technology. So think about this. Assistive technologies are usually ones you have to ask for, you have to get permission to do. They are seeing Copilot as an assistive technology that says it's not a nice to have, it is a have to have. And so these are some of the early data points that we're sharing with you, because clearly as you leave today, one of the biggest challenges that we find is convincing others that they should also begin investing time, energy, money, and attention into this inclusion journey towards accessibility. So with all that said, we have a short video on the Azure AI Foundry work that we did over the last year, and I'll preface this before we play it. You know, you all are here at Ignite because you respect Microsoft as we do, to be a very authentic organization. What I will tell you is, a year ago, they approached us to help provide user feedback and testing on the Azure AI Foundry tool. And this video is now the culmination of a snapshot of that human story of what's actually been done there. And so without further ado, let's play the video.
It is estimated that 20% of the global workforce identifies neurodivergent. I'm one of them. When I'm coding, the tools that are supposed to be helping sometimes disrupt my focus.
EY is rethinking enterprise intelligence. We want to unlock the potential of every employee because we know inclusion drives innovation. We operate the neurodiverse centers of excellence globally to promote the business value of an inclusive workforce.
Employees use Azure AI Foundry to create chatbots.
The idea was to make sure that the tool didn't exclude anyone.
I want to help advance neuro-inclusion, so I thought this was a good opportunity to contribute.
Microsoft and EY came together to brainstorm solutions, protecting users' ability to focus.
The notifications could be distracting, and we wanted to be able to filter and organize them and make them all actionable.
Microsoft product designers made prototypes and EY employees gave their feedback.
The Microsoft team actually wanted our input, and it was exciting to see how our feedback made the product better for everyone.
Microsoft products will maximize the creative power of thinking differently and being different.
It was rewarding to be working on this project, and I'm looking forward to working more with Microsoft AI.
So very quickly, I'm going to have to embarrass, the star of the show is sitting here in the front row. Can we have a round of applause, please, for John? So the last thing I'll say, Anna, before I hand back to you, is if you're sitting here today and your intention is to leave and to drive some momentum towards the accessibility inclusion journey and that intersection with technology and your workforce, you have partners like Microsoft and EY who are willing to share our stories and information with you and your leadership. So please, let's be on the journey together. I think together we'll make a massive difference in the world. Anna, let me hand back to you.
Amazing. Selfishly, I got to look at that video a little before we put it out, and it's nice to finally be able to understand neurodiversity in this way, especially, a little bit personally. But of course, I think what makes these conversations so critical is that inclusive design is not specific to any product, right? It's not specific even just to Azure AI Foundry. We have utilized similar practices of inclusive design sprints for Azure, which is a little different, though under the same family, right? And so part of the goal of talking with you all today about inclusive design, right, is everyone who learns about it learns and starts to practice it or infuse it into their day-to-day. The other part of it is to talk about some of the work we've done in Azure since day one to ensure that inclusive design was a part of our process and informed key strategic initiatives. The goal for us, right, was always to ensure that AI could be an engine for accessibility and inclusion, no matter where it lives. And so a big part of making sure that Azure meets this goal and delivers on this vision was to infuse inclusive design, specifically with folks who are neurodivergent. We wanted to reduce cognitive load and stay productive with Copilot in Azure. Now, a big part of inclusive design as a practice is co-design. Co-design adopts a nothing about us, without us practice. Nothing about us without us is a phrase that's used in disability communities when talking about practices, systems, and designs we create that affect their lives, affect our lives, right? This is critical to ensuring that what we build can include people, but also deliver on the innovation that is possible with inclusive design. Because at its core, and I will believe this through and through for the rest of my days, inclusive design is better design. So as a core part of our practice, we ensured that individuals with disabilities and neurodivergence actively contributed to our design process, specifically for Copilot in Azure. Now, part of this was working internally, having a diverse team, people like myself who identify as having disabilities and/or being neurodivergent. And then, of course, we brought in people externally to help inform our practice, to learn about how we could do more and better to make Copilot in Azure the most actionable tool that we could utilize. Now today, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what's available in Azure. Whether you've used it or not, I really am excited about these things because I think the capabilities here are exceptional. Now, all of this, of course, is going to be outlined in a way that focuses on cognition. We focused, again, on reducing cognitive load. We wanted to make sure that if you're using Copilot in Azure, that it helps you learn, it helps you focus, it helps you make key decisions, it helps you recall what you need to recall, and of course, to communicate seamlessly. All of these are things that we understand at Microsoft as key cognition tools, right? Things that inform how everyone interacts with what we create. So Copilot in this context is specifically designed to serve as a tool to empower people as they learn, focus, decide, recall, and communicate. Now, the feature I have up here on the screen, or rather the capability, this is a demo that shows what Copilot in Azure, which right now is in preview, does when you're asking a question such as, what are the limitations of the free pricing tier? Now, there's more questions than this. I am super eager for folks to try them out, and a lot of prompts that we have available already on Microsoft Learn for Copilot in Azure. So Copilot responds and gives you a set of reasons or limitations for the free pricing tier. So you can learn efficiently in context. And in context is really key here, right? Now, right now, what I have on the demo shows the sidecar, or the side chat with Copilot that is in Azure day to day. Now, you can open this at any time and ask for what you need. And that's a really key part of focus, right? When folks are trying to go through tasks and get through what they need to do, it can be really distracting to have to open a different tab and navigate to a different page. And so with Copilot in Azure, being able to open this and ask questions and learn what you need in context is key to making sure that people can focus on what they need to do and finish tasks without distractions. In this case, the demo shows, show me the VM that is incurring the most cost. So instead of having to dig this up, Copilot in Azure says, oh, actually, I can pull this up for you. No biggie, super chill. So it's very exciting to be able to do this. And I know a lot of us are familiar with capabilities like this in other parts of Microsoft. But in contexts like Azure, right, what makes this really significant is there's so many amazing things you can do with Azure. But to be able to pull what you need, and sometimes it can be highly technical knowledge in context, can really be a big difference maker for focus. Now, another really important aspect of Copilot in Azure, and some of the insights we learned, right, during our inclusive design sprints and inclusive design discussions with our co-designers, is how many big decisions get made. Now, when it comes to something like a VM, right, a virtual machine, people have to make the decision between, I think, 700-something options. And that can be really heavy. That load can be pretty significant. And so with something, when we were talking with folks during our sprints, we got a lot of feedback around how they wanted Copilot to really serve them and to help them make those key decisions, especially for something that can have impacts, right? And so in this demo, what the person does, or what what they're asking is, help me create a cost-efficient virtual machine. Now, what Copilot does is it guides them through the process, helps them choose what the options are that they want, and lets them make that decision with informed support. Ultimately, right, you're making that decision still. You have the power in your hands, but Copilot's supporting you in making that decision in Azure, reducing the amount of time you have to spend thinking about it, processing it, and learning even. Additionally, one of the most common things that people feel frustrated or anxious about are when there's things that they have to troubleshoot, right? And in anything that you do, anything that you create, there's going to be situations where you might have to solve problems. Now, what really is impactful about this is that Copilot can help you identify those issues with you. And I think one of the biggest things that we had come up during our sprints was when people would feel frustrated and really want a little lending hand, or virtual hand, so to speak, to help them when they're dealing with situations that are causing frustration or they're causing anxiety. And to be able to have something that says, if you're feeling that, to go, why can't my VM connect to the internet and have Copilot figure out what's going on for you is really instrumental to reducing the amount of anxiety when doing anything like this. And so what in this case happens, Copilot is, and I do speed this up because it takes time, right, sometimes, to figure out what's going on. Why is, what's the VM, why is it not connecting? Now in this case, the VM is actually connected and it's fine, but in other cases, they may not be, and it can help. And finally, this is probably my personal favorite, right? I think everyone has different levels of what we would consider quote unquote technical knowledge. And for somebody like me who is humbly technical, it can be hard to deal with something like having dyslexia and working in things like scripts and queries and code, because it's a language in a language, and I have to figure out where things are and what I need to adjust, while also having some difficulty distinguishing between things, right? And so what makes Copilot in Azure, the preview, really neat is that it can help translate natural language into queries and scripts. So it can take what your intentions are and give you the actions you need to deliver on what you want to do. Now in this case, I said, I want to use Azure CLI to create a web application. And what it does for me in this case is it helps me basically follow a set of steps so that I can do what I want, create the script I want, and to put it all in one script. Which, again, I think if you're somebody like myself who has been in the tech space or wants to be in the tech space, things like this can be intimidating, right? I think additionally, again, I've talked about a lot of capabilities, and this isn't just about capabilities. At its core, things like this come from the insights we've gathered from people who are our co-designers, who benefit from the capabilities to reduce their cognitive load. Now, these are just a snapshot of some of the things available in Copilot in Azure Preview that you can try out. And among everything, right, our goal was to deliver AI as an engine for accessibility and inclusion. Our goal continues to be that. So if you're trying this out and you want to give us feedback, please do, because we're always learning, and we can learn from you too. Now, I think this takes us to a little bit of time for Q&A. I will wrap my part up, and then Hiren, I'll have you wrap yours. But I want to kind of take a moment to say, I talked a little bit about Copilot in Azure and what you can do with that, and the ways it's designed to help with reducing cognitive load. You can try that out if you have access. You can also use the Microsoft Learn site to learn what prompts are really helpful. There's more than this, right? I also want to call out Microsoft Inclusive Design. Specifically, if you're interested in cognition and neurodivergence and inclusion with that in mind, definitely check out Microsoft Inclusive Design's Cognition Toolkit. A lot of really fantastic people worked on that. And big thanks to my team who helped out. Hiren.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of quick comments before we open up for questions. And by the way, we have to warn you, if you don't ask us questions, we're going to ask you questions. So you don't want that at 5:30 in the evening. So, you know, we covered a few things today. What is accessibility? Why is it important? Anna gave you some amazing data points for you to take back to your leadership, because clearly this is not a one-person journey. You need to get everybody else on board to do it. You heard a bit from us from a case study, literally over 9 years, on how we've kind of driven that inclusion journey that has produced over $1 billion in value around the world. These are hard numbers and a strong case. You've heard about the work in Copilot M365 that isn't just the Copilot being used to drive inclusion, it's those individuals now coming up with 63 use cases on how we could drive efficiency and new product and innovation. And I think lastly, in the Copilot for Azure, you heard a lot about some of the amazing features that are there. So with all this being said, we're hoping that you leave here today much better equipped with these resources, so you're as a reference to help think about your accessibility journey and that of your organizations. So, Anna, should we open it up and see if we have any questions?
The question is, if...
Yeah. So we'll do any in the room first, and then we'll see if there's any online?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, any questions in the room first? Or even if it's not a question, maybe your reaction. Did you hear something new or different that you were not expecting? And you don't have to get up and use the mic if you don't want to.
You can repeat your question.
Yeah, it's a small crowd. Yeah, please.
Do you have any suggestions for being a good ally for accessibility?
Oh, yeah. So the question was, just to repeat it into the mic, do you have any recommendations for being an ally for accessibility in the workplace, correct? I heard that right. Okay, good. I think I'll start us off if that's okay.
Sure.
But I think accessibility is a practice you bring every day in small ways. And over time, that scales. A big part of accessibility that I think is, and we're probably hearing a lot of this word lately, is based on community. And finding people who are interested in this space, who want to learn with you, who have identified as having disabilities and neurodivergence is really important. Whether you're working on that internally or if you are trying to build communities just collectively in your space, I think that's really critical. You know, for me, I started out as your everyday designer, and I just every day ask myself, what could I do that's more accessible? And that made a really big difference. And then I started sharing it like I am today. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we share, the better we are for it.
Yeah,
Hiren.
Those are great points, Anna. So I've got 3 suggestions. One, you may have heard that Microsoft has released a training, Accessibility 101. Have you heard this already? Oh, they just released it recently. What I hear, it's mandatory across all 230,000 Microsoft folks. The beauty of this is that it is available to all of us. And what I've heard is that the short version on that accessibility training is 20 minutes. So one, there's a link somewhere to this Accessibility 101 training. I'm sure it's on the Microsoft site. They are making it public to all of us. So I would say the first suggestion, take the training to be a good ally. 2, I think to be a good ally is talk about this with your colleagues, with your coworkers, with your leaders, because one of the biggest detriments of kind of prohibiting progress is that we don't talk about this. Partly because some people are nervous. They don't know the right words to use. They're afraid they're going to offend somebody. I think we need to all start that journey, and we need to engage others in doing so. The last one that I've learned personally over the years is be curious. And so with a number of my colleagues at work, I didn't know what helps them, what doesn't, and they're each different. And so I just did something pretty simple. I asked them. And they said, this is the best thing, because once you ask me, I can tell you what I need. And it seems so simple of a thing to do, but I think it created authentic relationship, and I think it helped me to be a better ally. So hopefully that helps between Anna and myself.
That's a really good point. I will mention, sometimes just asking is the biggest difference. I literally had a conversation today with somebody who asked, what accommodation could we give you for dyslexia? And I said, more time. But I think everybody works differently, right? Everyone's going to give you a different answer. So asking is makes a big difference. Really good points.
That's wonderful. Any other questions or reactions in the room? Yes, please.
Question. Can you hear me? Oh, yes, there.
Yeah.
I work for a large insurance company, State Farm. And thank you for putting these on, by the way, because I try to come every time or attend the accessibility sessions at Ignite, because I always come back to my company and be like, hey, new stuff. And I think that in some companies, they think, well, we already have the tools, right? And they don't think, well, they're fine the way that they are, right? That nobody needs anything. It's fine. We have what we need. But technology advances everywhere, including in the accessible space. And so for me, honestly, I came to Ignite thinking, oh, I'll check out the accessibility, stuff, see what I can bring back. And so we're running a proof of concept for Copilot. We have about 30 people. And we're all sitting there, in a meeting trying to think about, what kind of use cases, how can we, tell our leadership our story, and how can we bring it in. And I tell you what, not one person thought about accessibility, not until I got here, and I'm like, why aren't we doing this? Why didn't anybody think about it? Even I didn't think about it, and I come to all these sessions. So thank you for that. So we're going to go back and try to get some, users in the pilot that, have a need for maybe something like this, and that they can show hey, this would benefit us too, as a way to bring it in, try to bring it in. So just wanted to kind of put that out there.
No, thank you. First of all, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
It is the unfortunate reality that many times accessibility is sadly an afterthought for a lot of organizations. And partly, look, we get caught up in the speed of business, right? And then sometimes you think, well, am I the only person? By the way, disabilities, A, is not a bad word. B, it's not always apparent, right? So I think this is where some of planting those seeds, part of the ally conversation, talk about this, get educated, and when you start talking about it to others or being curious, you find more people coming forward. I think some of the great stats that Anna had in this deck that talked about from a business perspective, why should we be thinking about accessibility? I think those are powerful. And then lastly, if you're ever interested to hear more about our own Copilot user adoption journey, specifically from an accessibility neurodiversity standpoint, and how is it that the team came up with ultimately 63 use cases in a 6-week period, which we find to be pretty amazing. And so we're telling other companies, you can get that, but you need to have some precursors before that to have this safe space to hear those types of things. So I think between Microsoft and EY, we're happy to share more information. And if we can enable your journey, then we are making the world a better place. So thank you for sharing that. And anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've had this one on my mind a lot recently, and I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning. It's definitely okay, like this stuff happens, and a lot of accessibility lives in places you don't know, right? Things like, so I was giving this example pretty recently, like I use Zoom capabilities in a browser, for example, to help when I need support reading, which you know, even if a typeface is big enough, it can help a lot with what I need. But there's also other things, right? Accessibility lives in places that we don't expect because it doesn't always have that word on top of it. And so when you look at something like Copilot and you go, well, how does this help? You know, how is this an accessibility capability? Ultimately, everything we look at can have that impact. Think about, for example, something like dark mode. Dark mode comes up all the time, especially with our folks who are neurodivergent in these sprints. And they talk about how it helps reduce the amount of sensory impact in certain cases. And so I think it's very normal and condition that we don't always connect to these things, which is why I think, I come back to accessibility really does benefit everyone, even when we haven't connected those dots quite yet. But yeah, that's, I think that's my thought. Yeah,
No.
Very, very good points. And thank you for, thank you for joining accessibility sessions. Those are my favorite too.
We've got some more.
There's a few questions on the chat that I'm just going to share here, if that works.
Yeah.
So I thought this was a fun one. What are some ways we as colleagues can debunk negative perspectives when addressing D&I for a business need?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, I'll go again. What are some ways we as colleagues can debunk negative perspectives when addressing D&I, diversity and inclusion, for a business need?
Yeah, I think I love this question because I think there are so many perceptions, and unfortunately they're deficit-based perceptions. It's funny when we talk about disabilities and accessibility, there's always this symbol of the wheelchair that we think about mobility challenges. Well, that person has tremendous capability, but for some reason, and maybe it's society and just kind of how we depict these things, I think it's perceived as a deficit. And I think it's the use cases. I just learned something in the previous session. For those of you that may have been in the neurodiversity session, it was right next door. Did you all hear about do you use the hand raise feature in Teams? And did you know that was created by a neurodivergent individual because they didn't know when they should kind of interject? And so I use the hand raise feature all the time. I think some of the ways that you combat and you debunk some of this perception, the negative perception, is by telling success stories, making sure, Anna, you said something really powerful, often what is built for some is beneficial for all. And I don't know if many of you use closed captioning, like when you watch Netflix and stuff. I tried to watch Game of Thrones without closed caption. Let me say, I could not even understand the names of the characters. And so I use closed captioning all the time now. It was not necessarily built for me, but I think telling some of those stories and showing not just the ROI, because there's tremendous return on investment on this, but I think the return on experience, the ROE, and we think about that a lot these days. If we're wanting to enhance the employee experience and the customer experience, accessibility has to be at the heart of what we do. Yeah, anything, Anna, you'd like to add?
I think you spoke to it really well, and I find myself sometimes, I think this comes back to, I'll be brief, but I think what comes to mind here is, you can't always, people, especially when it comes to accessibility and inclusive design, some people, it just doesn't resonate right away, right? And so you start with the people who it does resonate with, and you build those communities, you build those your allies, and you learn together. And as that grows, right, people start to understand, right? This affects everybody. D&I, people like to put a very othering connotation, and accessibility, they put a very othering connotation. Yeah. But ultimately, it is about everybody. And so people take time in learning that, but ultimately, at its core, these things matter because of the people most impacted, but it does impact everybody.
Yeah, it does. I know we have less than 30 seconds left, so while we can't take any more questions, I'd like to ask you to all do something. So if you could leave here, tell at least 5 people what you learned today. And by the way, don't leave out telling them that this was the best session you've attended at Ignite, okay? Anna and I will not be offended if you were to do that, but seriously, if you could tell 5 people what we're talking about today, I think spreading that word would be a tremendous benefit. Any last words, Anna?
Thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, I think that's a great call to action. Really appreciate you all.
Thank you.